We will begin, and if anyone else trickles in, they'll just join us. So we're here to talk about kind of a number of topics today and tying up some loose ends from some ideas we've mentioned throughout the course of these series. So more on becoming an engaged community member, networking, leveraging influence, helping others find their voice, just more ways to become involved around local issues and campaigns. And our mission statement, this is mostly directed to Alan, so you can learn a little bit more about what we do. And our diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, an important lens for everything we do. And we'll take a moment from our various spots around Oregon to acknowledge the land that we're on. Sorry, I skipped a little too soon. Oh. Well, now I can't seem to go back, but welcome special guests. We have today Tara Brock and Alan Hancock. So I'll close up that. And I know Tara has to leave by 12:30. So I will hand this over to you.
And I'm going to go off camera for a little bit, but I'll be here.
Okay.
And I'll join you in a little bit.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. I love Surfrider, as you know. I've been a long-time volunteer and still come back in, and it's been great to be able to partner in a professional capacity with Surfrider as well. So Bree sort of gave me the rundown of today and sort of a focus for me of looking at how we use influencers and influential voices and grass tops to help meet our policy goals. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Oceana does. We are very lucky at Oceana because we have a bunch of celebrity supporters. And that's because Ted Danson actually formed his own ocean group long ago and merged with us, so that he brought a lot of his celebrity friends along and has really been good about bringing along more supporters, celebrity supporters, and making that a real core component of Oceana so that we get those influencer voices. And they do all sorts of things for us. They'll make videos on campaigns, on specific issues. Some of them are on our board, like Sam Watterson was just named as our new board chair. And so we're very lucky, and not every organization has access in that way, but Oceana has kind of made a real effort to make that a part of how we get at some of our campaign goals. So I'm just going to share a few things that we've done with our more celebrity influencers as a start, and then talk a little more about, from a grassroots perspective, what we can be doing to get grass tops and other influential voices to influence our decision makers. If that sounds like a good overview for folks. So I'm going to share my screen, or I guess I can't. You've disabled it. Can I share my screen? It's okay if not. I was just going to use some props or some visuals.
No, we'll make it so that you can share too. So it should be enabled.
Perfect. All right. Here we go. Which one am I trying to share here? Where is it? 2. Okay. All right. Can everybody see my screen here, my internet? Great. So this is our Oceana celebrity supporter page. And when I first came onto Oceana, I had no idea that we had such a large group of celebrity supporters, and we're trying to grow it all the time and get more people invested in caring about the oceans, and of course using their platform and their fans to then be able to speak about the issues that we all care about and our campaigns. So I'll just scroll through. I mean, we have some pretty big names on here, and that's really helpful. I will also say it's really hard sometimes to get these people to do things. They have publicists, they have their assistants and handlers. So, and sometimes the messages have to be very crafted because, or canned because they have an image of their own. So we're very lucky in that way where we get to work with many of these folks. And as I said, they'll do PSAs for us, all sorts of things. And one in particular, Jeff Goldblum, we were lucky enough, we were running a bill in California last year, and we were lucky enough to get him to come to Sacramento and spend a whole day lobbying with us. And we also had this happen a lot on the federal level where some of our celebrity supporters will actually testify to Congress. We've had Ted Danson do that on a number of occasions and others. So it's really great when we can get these celebrities to speak because it draws the media, it draws attention. The legislators were so excited. They all want pictures with them, you know, so it helps bring a lot of attention to our campaign. So we were working on a huge comprehensive overhaul plastics bill last year. And it was very helpful to have props for Jeff to hold up in the pictures. These are some of our, you know, metal straws that you're all very familiar with. And so this is just one example where we were lucky enough to have Jeff come out and be at the Capitol with us and help us talk to legislators. And afterwards, he actually did some outreach back to the legislators, personal touches. So you know, that was pretty exciting. And that is sort of the highest level in my mind of what you might do for getting, you know, somebody with a platform like Jeff Goldblum to help you out is unusual, I would say, but really lucky that we were able to do something like that. So another example that I was going to give during the same time when we were engaging some of our supporters was we were trying to pass this bill and we really needed the vote of a member. And so this is going to go into the next part of my discussion, but there was a member that we were really, he was like on the edge from what we heard. And so we were like, okay, what is he like? How can we influence him? What's the best way to get at him? And turned out he was a huge fan of The Office. And so we were able to get Oscar Nunez, who's one of our great supporters, to actually tweet at him and ask him to support our bill, which he ended up putting this really funny post together and was great. So again, another just thing, we're very lucky in that way that we have access to these people who are willing to help us out. But why I think this post is important. I'm sorry, is somebody asking a question? Let's see. Oh, Bree just says that's amazing. Yes, it was. We all got a kick out of it, and apparently the legislator's staff loved it. So ultimately, this legislator didn't vote for our bill, but we thought we made a really good effort, and his staff was thrilled because for these legislators, as we know now, social media is a huge part of the way they do their work and communicate. So their number of followers is really important to them. So when they get a mention by a celebrity, that can up their follower status too. So, you know, there's sort of that like giving them a boost in that way by calling them out and tagging them in tweets and things like that. So the reason I wanted to show this one was that, as I said, we kind of did a little research on the person we were trying to influence and what was going to influence him, trying to figure out what did he like, who might influence him. Ultimately, it didn't pay off in the way we were hoping, but wanted to get back to the idea of power mapping your decision makers. So what sort of voices are going to speak to them? So for me, it's sometimes it is grassroots support. Sometimes they just want to hear, if you're talking to a legislator, they want to hear from their constituents in their district. But sometimes they want to hear, maybe there's a specific industry that they've worked in the past, or that might be more influential. So it's not always a celebrity voice, but it might be a prominent restaurant owner or a chef or something like that, that might actually be more influential to them than somebody else. So that was sort of why I wanted to touch on that sort of power mapping aspect of our decision makers first. And then figure out, okay, well then what grass tops can we potentially use to influence that person and get them to support our policy positions. So I guess with that, I can answer questions unless there's more you'd like me to speak to, Bree, but that was sort of what I was thinking in coming into this.
Yeah, I'll just add another sort of anecdote. When the Portland chapter was working on their Ditch the Straw campaign, they were working with businesses to stop using single-use plastic straws. And eventually that turned into a campaign for policy. And Mayor Wheeler was talking about his favorite restaurant and how much he loves the milkshakes there. But the sort of lower quality paper straws, or they're too small, like didn't work for his favorite milkshakes. And so we, of course, went to his favorite restaurant and took them a sample pack from Aardvark straws, which is high quality paper straws, and they make like thicker or bigger straws that are better for milkshakes, so that they could test those out. And then Surfrider was able to offer a discount for that as well. So that way there could be a sustainable paper straw that made the mayor happy. But that's something that, like, you know, I have friends that that's their favorite restaurant too, that I'd been to in Portland, Byways Cafe, really delicious breakfast. But if you're a patron at that same restaurant or happen to know the manager, like, these people don't have to be celebrities. Like, you hear someone like Tara was saying, listen to what they like. And if it's a restaurant that you go to as well, you just be like, you know, when it's a slow time, kind of talk to the manager and be like, hey, I heard the mayor mentioned this thing. Can I help you find a solution? Or how do you feel about that? Would you be willing to write a letter to city council? So thinking about the celebrities is super cool, and people have some pretty amazing connections I've found out that they don't always tell you about. So there could be celebrity connections in your network. But you also have access to people who are influencers, and think about who are like local celebrities. Like, is there a radio personality you have a connection with, or restaurant owners, like Seven Devils down in Coos Bay, Local Ocean in Newport. Like, those people are kind of like local celebrities, local influencers.
Yeah, absolutely, Bree. That's a great point, that even on the statewide level, you know, you get those coastal restaurant voices and things like that are going to be really influential. And in thinking about the layers of, as I say, sort of grass tops, there's celebrities, but there's also other elected officials, right, who could be influential on a decision maker you're trying to influence. So for instance, when we're working at the state level, we might ask our city and county and local leaders and elected officials to weigh in with their state representatives and say, this is a policy we passed at home. We'd really like to see it on the state level. So there's also, you know, just depending on, we're not always talking about celebrities. That's just, Oceana's lucky that we have that sort of access. And so it was sort of the first thing that I wanted to share with you all. But absolutely, Bree's right. There are sort of your local celebrities. Who's well known in your community, and who do you think will be influential? Those are sort of the basic questions to ask when you're looking for those influential voices, I think. So, and I guess I'll just say one more thing. It could be someone who's not well known, but who has can carry an important message, right? So when we're doing plastics work, I think Bree has worked a lot with local waste management folks, people who can actually speak to your issue. Those are going to be more influential voices than perhaps just you or me. So thinking about like tapping into those sort of people too can be really important.
And I think something important to point out with like business owners, because, you know, a celebrity voice is fantastic, but they might not actually be able to empathize with the exact, you know, position. But a business owner can say, hey, I've converted to reusables and it has not been a hardship for me, and I've actually saved money or gotten more patrons. And so somebody who's actually in that position, because a lot of politicians will say, oh, you know, banning polystyrene is going to be a business hardship. So if you can get people who are in that position and can explain why it's not, that goes a long way.
So I haven't looked at your whole celebrity list, but are there any based in Oregon that Oceana works with?
Not that I'm aware of yet. I have been seeking for someone who is Oregon based, and also thought about, you know, who might have some Oregon roots even right here. And even if it's a connection through a business or something like that. But so far, no, I have not been able to find an Oregon specific celebrity that we could use to influence Oregon. But that's being said, I think celebrity engagement with folks is, you know, going to be meaningful, hopefully, or at least somewhat influential. And you never know. Some people do not care about that. I mean, we all think, ooh, celebrity is cool, but not everybody cares about that in the same way. So you really have to know your decision maker and what might influence them. And And then also just give it a try and say, hey, these voices were really effective with this person or with this in this community, and keep amplifying those voices, then find ways to amplify those voices. So yeah.
Any questions or anything else we want to hear from Tara before she has to go? She has a wealth of knowledge and experience.
Well, I just had something pop into my head, which was, small town like Coos Bay, if we could get the radio station person who's well known to be like, quote, on our side, and get them to buy in and to be doing PSAs. I didn't even think about that. Don't all radio stations have to do a certain amount of PSAs? There used to be a law about that. I don't know if the FCC has changed that, but so I guess maybe a question that could come out of that, Tara, is then how, maybe the kind of a brief outline of how do you plan, and then how do you approach somebody to be one of these grass tops?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, of course, first know what your ask is, what's your policy, and then try to lay out for them why it might make sense for them to support it, right? Just like you would, I think, with any decision maker, trying to get a grass tops on board is making the case to them. And it's even better if that person is already, in terms of a radio host or even a newspaper, a reporter. When you can get good relationships with reporters, that can be a very influential voice too. So someone who's reported on an issue that you care about, it's good that you could follow up and reach out. So that would sort of be my plan of attack, is figure out, well, what are we trying to get done? What's our policy goal we're aiming for? And why might this person care about it? And how can I convince them to help us and actually use their platform and their voice to get the message out there? So building relationships with reporters, especially radio, is really a good thing to be doing. And it can take a while because reporters want to trust you, and you can become a trusted source. If you continue to provide good information and really know your policy and understand all sides of an argument, I think that you can become a really good trusted source for people who want to come back to you. And then they're also more willing to keep writing about or talking about an issue if you keep kind of coming back to them.
So kind of a follow-up with that is, so you said when you said understanding both sides, so then when you're building that relationship with that person, of course, I would assume actually sharing, to say like, I can understand how landowners feel this way, or I can understand how business people are concerned about this, particularly during COVID or particularly whatever in a small town, and really actually sharing the part that we understand the other side. So it's not that we're just presenting our own when we're developing that relationship, to kind of present something full, but then make the case for why what we want is better.
Yeah, I think you could do both. You could say, and it might depend on the issue. Say, we understand businesses are hurting right now, but we need to look at the future. And we also know the economics of this situation, that, for instance, in terms of plastics, switching to reusables actually saves businesses money over the long term. We know that. We have data on that. But so knowing the arguments that your opposition might make, because if a reporter is doing their job, they're going to go talk to the other side and say, well, why would you be, or they might go talk to some local businesses. Why would you be opposed to this? And if you can anticipate those arguments and sort of preemptively address them. So say, we've heard from some businesses that they're concerned this could be costly. And given, what's happened over the global pandemic, that could be just an extra strain. But we know from restaurants that have changed and made the change to reusables that they can actually save money. And so it's just good to, kind of preemptively anticipate your opposition's arguments in talking to reporters can be helpful. That might not always be the best strategy. So you really want to think it through before you go in, right? And you don't necessarily want to, but I do think sometimes not coming across as like dismissive or of other people's concerns can be a good way to go about it. But just really understanding all sides of the arguments before you go in to talk to Because if they've done their work, they might ask you questions about that and being ready to respond. So.
Yeah,
Thank
it's a
you.
fine art, especially because, I've done a 30-minute interview where they use 90 seconds of it, and they're very good at clipping things. So not that they're going to reorder your words, but they might not include the entire clip of your point. So you get to be careful when talking about what the other side is saying. But if you have a really good relationship with a reporter, then they're usually less likely to kind of not capture the true meaning of what you were talking about. And then something
That's
else,
a very
just
good point, Bree. Yeah.
it can
Yeah,
be tricky sometimes.
when you get that relationship, just maybe speaking on background to people, make sure that you're off the record and you're just speaking on background can also be helpful. And then when you're truthfully being on the record, that's also a way to do that. Make sure you're very clear when speaking with reporters when you're on the record, or when I'm just speaking on background here, here's what we know, we understand and know, and that can be a way to avoid some of that too.
Mm-hmm. And then I was just going to add to what Tara was saying, and for Jean's first question of making sure there's a clear ask of the influencers, because oftentimes I see people saying, will you support us? And they're like, sure, what do you want me to do? And then people are like, just support us. So, a reporter, it's like general support for the chapter. You could say, well, what if we do a quarterly interview with you on your radio show? Or will you run 3 PSAs for us in the month of June, or for you in the month of January, to build up, ticket sales for the gala, those types of things, and being specific. So that way they know what exactly you're asking, how you want them to support.
That's a good point, Bree, especially, business owners or people who are just busy, being very specific, and then also sometimes helping them with the request. Like if you're asking them to send a letter, maybe at offering, say, I'm happy to help you draft this. And of course they can change it however they want, but it might just be that they say, yes, this looks great, and send it, I'll put my name on it, so sometimes it's helping them, because a lot of times the people we view as grass tops are also really busy, we all are, but that can be a good way to, oh, will you tweet this? Write the tweet for them, and say, and here are the handles and the people we want you to tag. Here's the hashtags you should use. Those sort of, I know Surfrider does a great job of putting together like media toolkits. So you'll have some like sample things that you could pick from, and here's good hashtags to be using and things. And if you can provide that for people and just make it as easy as possible to engage, especially for grass tops, because they do tend to be busier people, then that can be helpful. And with that, I do have to run, but
thank you so much
for inviting me. Yes, of course, and I hope I can join another one soon. It'd be great to continue to engage. So thanks. Good luck with all you're doing in Coos Bay and elsewhere, and keep in touch with how we can help too.
Thanks, Tara.
Thank you, Tara.
Great. Well, next up we have Alan Hancock, who I invited on. I've known Alan the last few years from living in Eugene, and I think of Alan as an absolute model of citizen activism and engagement, whether it's hosting a ballot filling party in his living room, or sitting on local citizen advisory committees, to doing a 30-year-long campaign to help protect and preserve some of the Willamette Riverfront, going to lobby days, and probably many more things I don't even know about. So I wanted to invite him on just to talk about ways to be involved in your local community. So welcome, Alan.
All right. Well, thank you, Anna. That's a nice introduction, and it is a reminder of all the different things that I'm involved with. And I should first say I haven't been involved with the riverfront protection for 30 years, but it has been a campaign that's been going on that long. I think, hearing you say that is what reminds me of one of the messages that I would probably advise other people that I am not particularly good at myself, which is really focusing in on a couple of areas that are of super importance to you and really sticking with it. I'm really fortunate that I've got a lot of flexibility in my schedule and my time, so I can be involved with a number of different kinds of different campaigns and issues that are important to me. But it's really easy to just get, if there's a lot of things you care about, which I do, and many people I know are care about a lot of issues, especially in these political times. It's really easy to get stretched too thin. And I think when I look back at the campaigns that I've been involved with that have been most effective, it's they're ones where I've really just stuck with it for like years and years, and I've built those relationships that you were talking about in the first half of the session. Those relationships take sometimes years to develop. There's that adage, or well, it's like the ad campaign thing is you have to know someone or meet someone 6 times or hear their name 6 times or whatever number it is before you gain some familiarity. And I think that's really true in doing citizen campaign kind of works, so that you have the trust with whoever that you're interacting with, whether that's a government official or media representative. But one of the challenges, I'll say, and I could go a lot of different directions with this, so I definitely seek your all's guidance, and I could talk about any of the specific things I was involved with. But is that when you've got some kind of campaign that might take years and years, or something that's ongoing and may never actually like fully resolve, like beach cleanliness, that's probably going to be with us for a really long time. Your players are going to be different over time. Like if you live on the coast, and you've been there for a while, and you're going to be there for as long as for many years, the government officials are going to change, the media is going to change, your neighbors might change. And so having a way to keep those people informed and to know who you are is part of the challenge, is to maintain that continuity. So for example, the campaign that Anna was mentioning about Riverfront, which is a piece of property that the University of Oregon owns, that is right along the Willamette River, that a number of citizen activists and faculty and students have been trying to protect for over 3 decades. There's this incredible challenge of students cycling through that almost universally care so much about this parcel of land, but you have to just keep re-educating them. And this issue has lasted so long that even most faculty and administrators have to be brought up to speed, because it only surfaces every once in a while. Maybe every few years there'll be some sort of change, some sort of planning action or administrative order that happens. And so suddenly, to bring your people together, you have to suddenly, like, well, where are they? Do you still have their email address? Is it still valid? And you're bringing new people on board that don't know anything about it. So I think knowing sort of the scope, the time frame of whatever it is that is most important to you can be really helpful, because then you can sort of strategize about whether this is going to be sort of a short-term effort, and it's going to be ad hoc, and you can just throw a lot of your energy into it and fight to the bitter end, or whether it's going to be something that's really long-term and that you're going to have to come back around to. And those are the ones where I think especially important of building those relationships. So I'll just take a little pause right there. Any prompts from you, Anna, or anyone else? I can keep going.
Yeah. So I'm curious if you can take us back to the very beginning of when you started getting involved in decisions that were being made for your community or by your community, and just tell us a little bit about how that started, how you got engaged.
Yeah, I've been an activist in one way or another since I was a kid. Since like probably about 12 years old. So I just have always seen the world as needing people to champion for, for the well-being of the earth. And so, what can I say? My first campaign was to try to stop water diversion in California as a teenager. And we were hand addressing envelopes to get people to write their legislators. And that was, before computers and all that. So it was a much harder ordeal. And, it's interesting because that same issue was brought in front of or I think Gavin Newsom brought it up just like a few years ago, the idea of diverting water from the Sacramento River and the Delta to supply farms in Southern California. It's like, wow, here it's come back 30, 40 years later, something like that. Just like these things sometimes have a really, really long life cycle. And so I hate to say it because, we're just going to be work on environmental issues like indefinitely, but that's probably the truth. So I don't know exactly how to answer your question. It's just like something that's innate in me that I just care about the world. So that's that inner source of motivation. And how to encourage that and how to like in other people is still a little bit of a mystery for me. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on how to get to inspire people to become engaged, because I'm always encouraging people like, oh, you could just like, show up at that city council meeting, or you could take part in this. And often people have interest, but maybe not so much follow through.
I was going to say, though, you seem pretty, at least to me, you've always seemed pretty fearless in being willing to talk to officials or other community members.
It's true. I mean, I have a lot of practice in doing it. It also helps that I have a lot of background in acting and improvisation. So just, being in front of people or being in front of a camera and that kind of thing doesn't really like faze me. Whereas some people that could be really kind of scary. And I'll be honest here, honest isn't quite the right word, but, as a white male, I have that level of rapport with other white males who are often decision makers or the people who are on committees. So, for better or for worse, it can provide some access to people or a level of comfort for me and for other people to be able to be of like, and so as organizations are trying to reconcile the injustices, the exclusion of groups of people, either intentionally or unintentionally, it's problematic for people who don't look like decision makers to figure out how to be able to gain the trust and support of people who may not look like them. So that's work that we all have to do. Yeah.
Well, one question I definitely wanted to make sure we touched on during this is we've talked before about joining citizen advisory committees, volunteering for that. And we actually had a roundtable discussion last week with a city councilor and a county commissioner. And both of them, especially the county commissioner, said, we're always looking for volunteers to join our committees. And I know you've been on some, so just sharing about what it's like to get involved in that, or any insight into being on those committees.
Yeah, I have been on a number of committees. I'm, in addition to being an environmental activist, I'm also do active transportation activism. I'm a real avid bicyclist. So I've had most of my citizen involvement, or my longest running citizen involvement, has been around active transportation. And there's also overlap between some of these things. So you're bound to start seeing, especially in smaller communities, you start seeing the same people in different places because they tend to be involved with more than one thing. But what I can say is that there's usually a learning curve for a lot of these committees, because there's the whole there's jargon, there's history, there's people. There's just like this whole geography and landscape about whatever it is that takes a while to become acquainted with it. But I just say, like, just jump in and ask questions along the way. You're like, what does this acronym mean that maybe everyone else seems to know, but don't be hesitant to be like, I don't know what it means. Tell me. And to just dig in a little bit farther to find out what some of the backstory is, because there often is backstory. And if you're in a position where you need to get information that is not, let's say, readily available through public sources, you might have to do a Freedom of Information Act request or some kind of other public record request. And that's where having an attitude, I forget the phrase that I've heard a couple people use, but to have like this disposition of like kind of a pleasant fierceness. That's not quite the combination of words. I forget what the combination is, but to just to be respectful of everyone is so important to be able to achieve your goals, because I've watched people who get really worked up and who get adversarial, and then they're shut off by people who have access to information or who are decision makers at some point. And so having the ability to even see your sort of opponents as real people that are just trying to make it through the day like everyone else is, and being respectful to them can really be beneficial. And they are often the gatekeepers to information that you might need. Yeah, again, it really so depends on the kind of effort that you're working on, but around coastal issues that could relate to land use, and that land use issues. I know you've talked about that in other sessions, but those are often involve real long-term campaigns. They involve a lot of legal and administrative kinds of administrative law and laws that are very unique to Oregon. So getting the information and having someone being able to interpret that for you, what that really means, is can be really important. So
if I can just share briefly, I'm on a city committee for the city of Newport, the 2040 Vision Committee. And coming from the nonprofit world, even as an observer, as an engaged citizen, like learning the Robert's rules, and I'm the chair now, so I run the meetings, and it's like you have to have the motion and the second and then discussion and everything. You have to wait for the quorum to start the meeting, and then I have to actually say that the meeting is ended. And so learning that stuff can be tricky, but something, we're recording, but that committee, we've been trying to change the culture a little bit of city committees, and we're very unique in that we have grant funding from the Ford Family Foundation, and they're all about celebration and community building. And we were just on a funder check-in with them, and the city manager was talking about the vision coordinator and saying, well, she's always trying to correct me, and she's always trying to set me straight, and I'm always trying to set her straight, because we're like kind of trying to change that culture of a little bit of the formality, definitely equity and inclusion, having our meetings at City Hall can be a barrier to some of those voices that are often left out. Conducting our meetings only in English can be a barrier, and starting to look at those. So it's been an interesting experience of trying to change that government culture a little bit, kind of from the inside. And we're starting with our committee and having a lot of fun in our committee, but really trying to help support a lot of like the diversity, equity, inclusion efforts that some of the counselors are really working on, But it is sort of this weird thing coming from Surfrider. And then I put my vision hat on. It's like, okay, we'll have to follow these steps in the meeting to go through. And we're not using consensus. I got to do this voting thing. So it is a very different culture and different decision-making structure, but there's some wiggle room in there for kind of changing how decisions are made, and also just kind of, I think, changing the culture a little. And there's been tension there because of how we've changed things a little bit.
Thanks for sharing your story. I think what that reminds me of is knowing like what you're good at and finding sort of your role. And you've rose to being the chair of that committee, and see that one of your roles or your capacity you have might be shifting the culture a little bit so you can create more inclusivity. And with the active transportation committee that I'm part of, because I've been involved with it for so many years, on several occasions people have asked me, hey, are you interested in being the chair of the committee? And I'll nominate you to be the chair of the committee. And I've thought about it and like, oh, that sounds really nice. I really appreciated it. But then I stop and think about it. I'm like, oh, if I'm chair, then I'm running meetings and I'm doing the background work to kind of get the meeting ready, but I'm not really in the position to be able to express my opinion and to bring kind of all the knowledge to a meeting. I mean, that's kind of inappropriate to wear both hats, or it's very difficult to both be a chair and to be a participant. And my skills in that particular case are around the breadth of knowledge that I have in that particular area. And so if I accepted that position, I wouldn't be able to serve in that way. So just kind of knowing what you're good at and knowing what you want to accomplish, I think can be really helpful. That was also the case with this effort to protect the riverfront, because it was an interesting coalition of both students and faculty members, and in my case, citizen members. I'm an alumni at the University of Oregon, but more coming from sort of a citizen perspective. And so each one of those groups has their own way of being influential. The people who are faculty members can talk about the importance of having this space along the river as a learning outdoor classroom. And so they're coming at it from that perspective. And that's not something, and so I can't talk about that. I'm not a faculty. I'm, not even associated with the university. But what I can do is I can organize people. And so I can, bring together different groups that might not, otherwise speak to one another, like faculty and students, or citizens and students, and so forth. So that's, even though that might not be the thing that I'm most inclined to do, it's something that I have the capacity because of kind of who I am and what my role is in the situation. So being in a grassroots effort, that's usually not so formalized as in a nonprofit or where you're an employee. I think it's still helpful to really think about who's going to take on particular roles and kind of keep within that job description, even if it's not a job in itself, to be able to let other people to take on their part of the work.
I'd like to see if either Jean or Diane have any questions or comments, insights.
Well, Alan, thank you very much. And for sharing that, I'm incredibly inspired. Good. And how did you find out, you said that since age 12 was when you started being an activist, and when did you start doing acting, and how has your improv and that ability to just, I'll say, be present and respond appropriately, and maybe even with humor? I kind of associate improv with humor or looking at things different ways. Like how did those work in your life? How did those start?
Oh, that's an interesting question. And it's probably not something I've given a whole lot of thought to. They're kind of different interests in different parts of my life, but as it turns out, they've dovetailed together really well. I can't tell you how many life skills are applicable from doing improvisational theater, and including having presence with other people and being able to try to assess what the people you are around are wanting. And I should be clear, and I won't go into the details here, but the type of improvisational theater that I was involved with for many years is a very specific niche. While it can sometimes be humorous, it's often not. It's a form called playback theater, where we play back stories from people's everyday lives, and so there's a way in which you need to really, as I said, really be present with the people that you're with. So again, that's a whole nother story there. But so it wasn't coordinated. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to become an activist and do acting. But in retrospect, I see how that's really served me well. Yeah. I did have one other thought. Oh, Anna mentioned the ballot parties, and I haven't said anything about that. And that's just been really fun to gather people together in either in person, or last fall it was online on Zoom, and we just went through the ballot, one measure and one candidate at a time, and we just talked about them, and some of them we didn't know very much about, and went back and did a little bit of research, and but other cases were a lot more obvious. And because I have been serving on the League of Conservation Voters steering committee for a lot of years, I've gotten to know a lot of candidates, and I can't say enough about the being on the League of Conservation Voters or other similar kinds of organizations that interact with legislators when they're running for office, because it's one opportunity where they really want to hear, that they'll really be present for you because they want your endorsement. And usually it's, at least in our case, a very intimate kind of arrangement where there's only a handful of people on our committee and one legislator at a time. So if you do that after a few years, they get to know you and you get to know them as candidates. And wow, they can be incredibly different people. It's just amazing how, like with our last city council race, there were a couple of people running, and on paper, this one candidate looked really good, and I would have voted for her if I hadn't been part of this endorsement committee. And when she came to our meeting, I was just like, this woman is like so scatterbrained, so unable to articulate in person what she wanted to do, and had no campaign strategy. I was like, there's no way I would ever vote for her, even though, again, on paper, it looked really good. So I was able to bring that to our Zoom ballot party and say, look, I've met both of these people, and you might be tempted to vote for her, but I really wouldn't do it. So again, that's a good way to be able to sort of get your foot in the door to gain some access to a legislator. Yeah, especially the county and state legislators. So I know we're getting.
As a person who's attended both his in-person and virtual ballot parties, it's such a great format for community building, because there's camaraderie, you know, people are coming together, of course, having a good time because there's this communal aspect, but really learning from each other, because we always, you know, Alan's sort of the expert on the candidates and the issues, but other people have insights too. So you have this knowledge share, you know, certain people know a lot more about one measure because they're in education or whatever the topic's about. So it's just a great, I don't know, I really grew to look forward to it. And then I hosted my own like mini ballot party when I was down in California. And it's a great excuse, especially if you're hosting it, then the pressure is on you to do some research ahead of time so that you at least know a little bit what you're talking about. So
Yeah, indeed. That reminds me that there's a election coming up soon about school board members, and I know nothing about that. So it'll behoove me to reach out and encourage someone else to take that one on. Yeah.
It's also, we should, for future brown bags guests, it'd be really awesome to do a session with Oregon League of Conservation Voters, which, if you remember back towards the beginning, I can't remember which brown bag it was. I think it was building relationships with your legislators. We pulled up OLCV's scorecard as a great way of getting to know how they've voted on conservation issues. So that's a connection. We talked about OLCV, but I think it'd be awesome for our members to learn more. As staff, we work with OLCV, but really awesome organization. I'm glad you talked about that a bit.
Yeah, it's a good way to hold legislators accountable by reminding them that you know, there is this scorecard. Then they are more aware when they're actually casting their ballot that there's people who are going to be, you know, holding their feet to the fire. There was one time where we, as a steering committee, used the response that someone gave on their questionnaire to us, like 3 or 4 years later, when there was a legislative issue that came up, and we were not certain about their position. And so I went to the computer and I looked up their response and said, this is what they said they were going to do and what their opinion on this matter was. And so, you know, we let them know that that's what they said and that we have it, you know, in writing. And I can only, you know, think that helped. They ended up, you know, supporting what we were looking for, but it's hard to know whether that was effective, but it certainly can't hurt.
all right. Well, I
Right.
want to be respectful of everyone's time on this beautiful day, but thank you so much for joining us, Alan. I love hearing about your.
All right, good. Well, thank you,
Yeah,
Anna.
this was great. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah. Good to meet you all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go out there and make things happen.
Yes.
Alan, thank you for sharing so beautifully. So what I really got from you was that you speak from your heart.
Mhm.
You speak from your experience. You speak from what you've observed in maybe stepping into other people's shoes, stepping into to like be present with them. I just have that impression about you. And I'm really moved by how the quality of how you were with all of us today. And you're really a model for me. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
Well, thank you all for joining.
Okay.
And Diane.
Bye-bye.
Diane.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you both. Thanks for always coming.
Well, thank you. Well, I did miss one. I was in Portland, but thank you for doing this. And I have no idea what it takes for you to do this.
Oh, I mean, it's fun for me to connect because Alan's a pretty good friend of mine, but he's a model to me too. As somebody, it's like, oh, you don't actually need to have a job in this field or be an elected official to really make an impact. And I just thought, oh, he has stories I want to share. So it's like a joy for me to get to do that. Get to help him share his stories, and same with Alexis. So, and I have learned so much from all of this. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank
Well,
you. And I'm glad that other people are enjoying being able and benefiting from being able to, because they can't participate in person. I'm glad that those are available. And also because I'm going to go back and watch them all again,
yes.
because there's so much more to get from
Yeah.
them.
So that is my homework the next couple weeks, is to get all those blogs up there, because it was easy to fall behind, but yeah, I'm going to get those up so that people can watch, and they are just such good resources. So
They
yeah,
are.
well, thank you, Jean. I appreciate you so much. Maybe someday we'll meet in person.
Well, I sure hope so.
I know, it'll be so fun.
We have a guest bedroom, so.
Oh, well, thank you. And I do too now. So
All right.
all right. Have a good day.
Thank you, Anna.